The gavel crashes, a $12,000 promise betrayed in the house of Judge Judy. The air in the television courtroom was thick, not with the dust of neglect, but with the electric charge of shattered trust and the raw, simmering anger of a broken family bond. A case that would soon unfold under the unblinking, wise eyes of the one and only Judge Judy, a woman whose very presence commanded a silence so profound you could hear the weight of a lie hitting the floor. This was the stage for a heartbreaking drama between a mother, named Linda, a woman whose face was etched with the deep lines of disappointment, and a love that had been stretched too thin, and her own son, a young man named Brandon, who stood there with a mixture of defiance and shifting unease, accused of a most personal betrayal. The case was simple in its outline, but devastatingly complex in its emotional fallout. Linda, with a heart full of maternal hope and a savings account built from years of hard work, had handed over a staggering $12,000 to her son. Brandon, a sum she had meticulously saved for the noble, specific purpose of securing a comfortable, safe apartment for herself, a sanctuary in her later years. This was not a gift. It was a sacred transaction of trust, a mother's belief in her son's promise to be her financial guardian, to act as the temporary holder of her dream. The agreement, as Linda recounted with a voice trembling with the effort to remain composed, was crystal clear. Brandon was to be a mere vessel, a conduit for the money, holding it securely in his own bank account only because of some banking technicalities, with the unwavering, non-negotiable understanding that he would return every single penny, all $12,000 the moment his mother, Linda, found the perfect apartment and called upon him to fulfill his part of their pact. The suspense in the room was palpable, a living entity, as everyone waited to hear how this straightforward plan had spiraled into a legal battle, a public shaming in front of millions. Judge Judy, her gaze sharp enough to cut through the thickest fog of deception, listened intently, her expression a mask of impartiality that promised a storm of truth. Then the story took its first dark turn. Linda, her hands clasped tightly together as if physically holding onto her composure, explained that after months of searching, her heart finally leapt with joy when she found the ideal apartment, a lovely little place that felt like home the moment she stepped inside. With excitement bubbling in her chest, a feeling she hadn't experienced in a long time, she immediately called her son Brandon, her voice likely filled with the happy anticipation of a new beginning. "Brandon," she probably said, "I found it. Our plan is working. I need the money for the deposit and the first month's rent." But the voice on the other end of the phone was not the supportive, reliable son she thought she knew. Instead of congratulations and immediate action, there was a pause, a hollow silence, followed by a stammer, an excuse, and then a chilling, devastating refusal. The money, the $12,000 of her hard-earned life savings, was gone, vanished. Not lost to a bad investment or a stolen wallet, but spent, frittered away by her own flesh and blood, her son, Brandon. The emotional impact on Linda was like a physical blow. She described the feeling as a sucker punch to her soul, a betrayal so profound it stole the air from her lungs. The dream apartment with its sunny windows and quiet rooms faded away, replaced by the grim reality of financial ruin and a heart fractured by her own child's actions. The suspense now twisted into a razor-sharp question. How? How could a son do this to his own mother? What could possibly justify such a cruel, calculated act? All eyes and the full, formidable force of Judge Judy's attention turned to Brandon. Under the bright, unforgiving lights of the courtroom, he began to weave a tapestry of excuses, a flimsy shelter of justification that began to crumble the moment Judge Judy began her methodical, relentless interrogation. He didn't deny taking the money. Oh no, he admitted it freely. But he claimed, with a stunning lack of self-awareness, that he felt entitled to it. He painted a picture of his mother, Linda, as somehow unreliable, suggesting with a weak voice that he needed the money more, that he had bills, that life was expensive for a young man like him. He tried to argue that there was no formal, written contract, as if a mother's trust required notarization to be valid. But Judge Judy was having none of it. She saw through the thin veil of his lies with the precision of a laser. She began to dismantle his pathetic defenses one by one, her voice rising with the power of pure, unadulterated logic and moral clarity. "Let me understand this," she boomed, her words echoing in the silent, captivated studio. "Your mother, Linda, worked for this money. She saved it. She entrusted it to you, her son, for one reason and one reason only. It was her money for her apartment. Did you or did you not have an agreement that this was a temporary holding situation? That you would give her the money back when she asked for it?" Brandon squirmed, his eyes darting around the room looking for an escape that did not exist. He mumbled a response, a non-answer about how he interpreted the agreement differently, a claim so ludicrous it drew a gasp from the audience. Judge Judy leaned forward, her presence dominating the room, and her next questions were like hammer blows, each one striking at the core of his dishonesty. She demanded a detailed accounting, a forensic breakdown of where exactly her $12,000 had gone. "What was so important?" she pressed, her tone dripping with sarcastic disbelief. "Was it a medical emergency? Were you facing homelessness? Or was it for frivolities, for toys, for entertainment, for a lifestyle you hadn't earned?" Brandon, crumbling under the weight of his own guilt and the judge's piercing gaze, was forced to confess the ugly, shameful truth. The money hadn't gone to necessities. It had been lavished on selfish, fleeting pleasures. There were charges for expensive electronics, perhaps a new high-end smartphone or a giant television, receipts for lavish dinners at fancy restaurants with his friends, withdrawals for weekend trips and concert tickets, and maybe even a down payment on a flashy, unnecessary car upgrade. Each admission was another knife twisting in his mother's heart, and the audience watched in a mixture of horror and fascination as the full, sordid picture of his betrayal was laid bare. Judge Judy did not soften her approach. She highlighted the sheer audacity of his theft, emphasizing that this was not a stranger or a distant acquaintance, but a son stealing from the woman who gave him life, who had likely sacrificed for him his entire life, who had trusted him implicitly. The emotion in the room shifted from suspense to a deep, resonant sense of outrage. You could see the pain on Linda's face, a quiet, dignified agony that was far more powerful than any outburst of anger. She had been robbed not just of her money, but of her faith in her own child, of the very foundation of their relationship. The case was no longer about a simple debt. It was about the violation of a sacred bond, the destruction of a family's trust, a lesson in how greed can corrupt even the closest of blood ties. The tension built to its peak as Judge Judy prepared to deliver her verdict, the moment of truth where justice would be served in her courtroom. She summarized the facts with breathtaking clarity, leaving no room for doubt about Brandon's culpability. He had accepted the money knowing full well the strings attached. He had spent it with reckless disregard for his mother's well-being, and he had the gall to stand before her and the court and try to justify his despicable actions. There was no legal loophole, no clever argument that could save him from the consequences. With a final, powerful strike of her gavel, a sound that echoed like a thunderclap of justice, Judge Judy ruled decisively in favor of the plaintiff, Linda. She ordered Brandon to repay the full $12,000, every single cent he had so selfishly stolen, and she likely added court costs and damages on top of it, ensuring that the financial penalty matched the profound moral wrong he had committed. The relief on Linda's face was palpable, a mixture of vindication and profound sadness, for while she had won the judgment, she had likely lost a son that day in that courtroom, a loss no amount of money could ever truly repair. The lesson from this dramatic and emotionally charged story is a stark and vital one for every viewer and listener. When it comes to money and family, the lines of agreement must be drawn in permanent ink, not fading pencil. Never assume that a verbal understanding, especially with family, is strong enough to withstand the temptation of greed or poor judgment. If you are lending money or, as in this case, entrusting someone with your funds for a specific purpose, you must create a simple, written contract that clearly states the amount, the purpose, and the terms of repayment. This is not a sign of distrust. It is an act of protection for both parties. It protects the lender from being exploited and the borrower from the temptation of misusing funds they know they are legally obligated to return. The sanctity of family is precious, but money has a notorious corrosive power that can destroy the strongest of bonds. Protect your relationships by protecting your financial agreements, so that a matter of dollars and cents does not shatter a lifetime of love and trust, leaving behind only the bitter ruins of regret, as it so tragically did for Linda and her son, Brandon, in the unforgettable, sobering arena of Judge Judy's court.